we're getting on the afternoon, so we're gonna keep this one interesting and move it along. Keep you awake, I promise. So I'm Adam Mariano. I'm the president and GM of the healthcare division of LexisNexis Risk Solutions, and I'm here today with Sushma. Sushma, do you want to just do a quick intro?
Yes, hello everyone. Sushma Akunuru, SVP CIO from Independence Blue Cross. I'll tell you a little bit about who Independence, what Independence is, but I'll let you kick off the subject for today.
Sure. We've been having a conversation for a couple of days now, and we actually just came out of a podcast talking about the same thing, which has been sort of the transformative nature of healthcare and how we've moved essentially from an analog to slowly to a digital world,
right,
for patients and providers. And what's left to do, really? There's plenty left to do.
There's a lot to do. So maybe I'll start with, so for those of you who are not familiar with what and who Independence Blue Cross is, we are the largest health insurance company in the southeastern Pennsylvania area. We've been in this business for 85 years as the chosen Philly local team. And we invest in a couple of plans. And the most important thing for me, coming from banking industry, I've only been 4 years with Independence Blue Cross. And what I find fascinating is the deep commitment to the communities that Independence serves. And the reason I'm saying that is, doesn't matter if it's Independence or another payer, another provider. Today, in the last 2 days, you have probably met a lot of companies and you've made some new friends. Think about those organizations that have like their vision and mission so deep rooted in the cause, and those are the companies that are going to survive. So very thrilled about the digital transformation that Independence has been through, and then the fact that I seem to be adding some value. I'm here for a reason, and I would love to share some of my thoughts on how we pivoted from being sort of the traditional invest in people, but now invest in people, but invest as much in modernizing your ecosystem.
And I'll share just for background from a LexisNexis risk perspective. Our healthcare business is focused in data and insights in the patient and provider spaces, and sort of all of the transactional data that happens in between. So enough of the commercial. We've been talking about this. There's been a really interesting, perhaps slow moving, because it's healthcare and tech moves a little slowly, and we talked about the fact that it's good to celebrate some of those wins, but it's been an arc from what was a hand-to-hand, face-to-face transactional set to early digitalization, where we went through meaningful use around EMRs and got into claim systems and everything was digitized, to the move to the web and the cloud and people having apps in their pockets, to now what is slowly becoming a fragmented but definitely democratized space. And we talked about this a bit, where you can choose a digital provider, you can go to a pharmacy and get a little bit of care, you can go to an urgent care, you can have digital and text only services if that's your desire. You can get engaged in telehealth, and we're seeing those extensions on telehealth laws that have now gone through multiple extensions.
Right.
Or you can have a balance of all of those things as part of your profile. What have you seen on your side of the house with IBX in your arc to today?
Yeah, no, I wanted to share one personal experience, right? Probably that will tie all of the things that you just mentioned, Adam. A couple of months ago, my daughter, I have 2 daughters, one of them fell, it had a fracture, we had to rush to the urgent. She's okay, by the way. It's been months now, she's in total path to recovery. But the experience in those 4-5 days to follow that event, especially the first 4 hours, I would say, kind of framed everything for me as a consumer. Like me being the member on this side, and also sort of going through the process of all of the processes and technologies that I had to touch during that process was eye-opening. And I share that because from point of care, finding a provider, being able to have her admitted for care right away, and I had to show my member ID card. I was in a rush, I didn't pick my bag, so I had to pull my phone and show the digital wallet. Right, my member ID was right there. All of her profile showed up in an urgent care that was out of my area because I was rushing and couldn't find the right one, went to the wrong place. Doesn't matter, but within hours, her prescription being sent to the nearest pharmacy. On my drive back, I was able to pick that, give her the relief that she needs. So the mental stress, right, which is caused by the incident itself, not to be adding to that in terms of Where should I go? Will this be covered? Is this going to be expensive? Like, none of that comes to your mind, but not for many people, right? I'm fortunate to have not worried about it, but for several Americans, it is a question, right? You don't want to be in the middle of trying to solve an emergency and trying to worry about what will the bill look like after a week, right? So for me, it was bringing it home with that mobile app. I was so proud that day to open IBX app and sort of see everything come through in terms of that journey. Within a couple of days, I saw the claim come through. It's been paid, and the explanation of how much was paid, how much was covered. It was incredible. And I went back and thanked my team. And that's why I'm sort of reminding everyone here. In the last 2 days, I've noticed a lot of kind of a little bit of a shaming, right? Oh, shame on us. Healthcare is behind. Why is banking ahead? So maybe it's time we kind of pause for a minute and acknowledge the fact that we have come a long way. Let's not dismiss the fact that, remember those days when you had to go to a bank, a physical bank, and fill a paper to deposit money and be like, I just take a picture of my check. Why can't healthcare be that easy? Well, we have come there, right? So I don't want us to sort of not acknowledge the fact that today you don't have to. There is still some providers you have to fill long charts, so we'll address some of those gaps. But I think companies have invested in interoperability, in connecting your systems so well that from a member perspective, you are not burdened with the administrative work in the middle of worrying about clinical work. So I think there's more to do, no question. But maybe it's time we pause and acknowledge all the things. And I encourage all of you, as you go through your personal health journeys, participate, right? Think about, well, if I'm using this app, how can it be better? What if there was this capability that was added on top of this? What if instead of me calling customer service, there was a way for me to get the same information through another channel? So I encourage you to
use the
participate.
feedback button, right?
Feedback button,
Yeah,
yes.
don't
absolutely.
ignore it. So we can thank Sushma for putting some positivity out there today, because there's been a lot of that. I'm going to yank the rug out from under all of you and be negative, which is, I think you illustrate when it goes well, right? It's a great path. And you told me you've had experiences where it hasn't gone so well, but
Yeah.
that's the happy path. Is a person is educated about what's in their hands. They have the right device.
Right.
They use the app. They understand the journey. They've got a little bit of their own health literacy, so they can handle a condition and they can get those things connected. But I think the part we want to talk about a little bit is, what's left to do. Where are the difficulties in how do we balance the lack of health literacy? 9 out of 10 people in the US still have struggles with health literacy. And we know that this is a struggle. We also know people don't always have broadband. There are people who don't have smartphones still. We act like that's a ubiquitous thing, but it is inside this room. But leave this room and go out in the regular world, where people aren't all healthcare professionals in technology. And you find it's an awful lot of people with phones that won't support a lot of the applications. The applications move. We have language barriers. So what can we do in these spaces? What's left to do in these spaces for us to sort of pull things along a little further? So to your point, we made a great progress, and yes,
there's absolutely more to do, like I said. And I'll quote a stat that Anand from UST had shared earlier, which kind of is going to stick with me for a long time. It's startling, right? 80% of the health outcomes are influenced by healthcare related factors, like where do you come from, how literate are you about health literacy. And this is very important because I personally have gone around saying this. 10 years ago, I did not know how an member ID card looks like. I didn't know which plan I was part of. Not because I wasn't educated. You can imagine I had a job, I was working. I cared less because my husband was paying for it. And every time I had to end up anywhere, I was always with a family member who kind of took the steering wheel. So I'm saying that, almost admitting to the fact that until it hits you, it doesn't hit you, right? So we don't want to be that kind of passive participants in healthcare and then say, oh my God, like, I don't know why we are not sort of moving the needle. I don't know why we're not changing this. So there's a lot to be done. But now that I'm part of healthcare, I can see that, for example, Independence invests a lot in sort of finding those data points and identifying gaps in the communities we serve to find opportunities where maybe through our foundation or through certain partnerships like yours and with UST, we want to sort of push for where it's possible to sort of uplift communities as a whole and their social factors, not so much focused on clinical healthcare alone, because that indirectly has a huge impact. And you're absolutely right. There are programs, there are ways to do that, advocacy groups, there are other ways we can participate and not just sort of look at it from purely like because I represent a payer, there are so many things I can influence as a payer alone, but that's not going to be enough.
Yeah. And you hit on it. Social determinants is responsible for the vast majority of outcomes. And we ignore it a lot. We actually spend a lot of time in this space as an organization. It's one of the services and data points we provide as part of consumer data. And the reality is there's so much programmatic that can be built in this space, but also when you think about access to software and how you present things to people when scheduling a visit, it's really something simple. If you don't have night and weekend hours, if you don't have providers that speak the language at hand, even if you don't have providers that look like patients who might be attending a visit, you have a fall off in compliance, you have a fall off in visiting. But people who don't have sick time, for argument's sake, can't go to a daytime visit. It seems like a silly thing. We've talked about social determinants for a long time now, but we're seeing folks like your organization and others take action. So I think some of the things we have to think about are how do we make that data timely? There are large-scale organizations that will survey, 40 million members once a year or once every 3 years. And they're proud when they get to 2 million of them. But the 2 million people you surveyed, 6 months later, that data is stale. And the rest of the people you didn't get a chance to survey still don't have that access. And asking people to volunteer this information is often difficult. So there's lots of opportunity for us to think about how do we help monitor those communities and offer them insights and provide them pathways to care.
That's true. And, there's been a lot of talk about AI, the role of, digital tools and modern technologies in advancing the purpose and the goals that we have set for ourselves. I feel like the core of that, fundamentally, we need to be good with data, right? The data collection process, the systemic bias that's in the data that we were looking at, all of that has to pivot. And the only way that will happen, again, I go back to my plug, participate, please participate, right? Something that I've told myself, I have a big poster sort of stuck on my wall, which reminds me that I cannot sort of not influence the fact that when you look at data, another interesting stat I was shared was apparently when you go to emergency, there is a procedure for those who are discharged to come back and pretty much close the loop with your care. And for certain ethnicities, that closure never happens, right? And data shows that that's because there's fear, there's that lack of knowledge about why should they come back and, follow up with that visit. All of these it's all almost talking. It has sometimes nothing to do with financial, competency. It's like, whether I can afford it or not, I just don't want to do it because I'm not either been oriented towards that, or to your point, maybe I'm at a place where I don't have commute options, right?
Exactly.
Simple things like those. How do you sort of find the right sources to find data-oriented insights and bring those to our consumers?
So as we go down that pathway and we think about democratizing these services, so really offering patients and members essentially any array of things they want.
Right.
There's this balance you sort of have to strike where you need to bring a lot of data to play, to your point. We collect a lot of data from consumers. We leverage a lot of data from third-party sources. There's this idea of how can we democratize? How do you balance that democratization with data safety and controls? One, so that there's not too much friction. So patients and members want to play along. They want to get engaged. There's not 16 opt-ins that start to scare them. But also there's enough data in play that you can actually service folks and keep the ecosystem safe.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Maybe this will kind of hit that home, right? How many of you order stuff on Amazon? Almost all of us.
Should see 100, I would imagine.
Can you imagine a day you've added stuff to your cart, but it does ask you to, again, enter your home address? And also enter sort of your preferences all over again. And you're like, I order almost every other day. Should you not know me enough, right? Should these apps, whether it's DoorDash or any other vendor you work with, should they not know enough of you? So convenience is the key, right? So your life is made convenient and you don't have to sort of go through the burden of the stuff that you've done already. It's the same analogy, right? But on the flip side, the other day I was chatting with my girls about a vacation that we wanted to plan to Cabo, right? Mexico. And the next thing I know, I opened my phone. All of the commercials were around Mexico. And I'm like, I never typed a word, I swear, and my girls didn't. So I'm like, who is listening to us? So there's this fine line about I want to be tailored, right? I want services tailored to suit my wish and will, and I almost want the world to read my mind and deliver things that suit me. But I also want to draw a fine line on, privacy matters. So where do you then think about now the complex healthcare ecosystem, and then we expect certain things to happen? It's not going to happen magically, which means there has to be that intentional effort to sort of collect information, take consent, but use it wisely, use it ethically, and use it where it makes more sense to actually increase value and convenience for consumers, not to drive so much of your own business agenda. It's a very fine balance. Not
It
everyone does it
is.
well, but you know.
And I would consider myself a technology theorist sometimes. I'm coining the term in case anybody else hasn't said it yet. And I like to think of ideas that make sense as we go forward. And one of them is, we need a standard for permissioning,
Right.
which could be used across industry, which is you get used to it. And maybe Amazon teaches us,
Right.
here's your opt-in permissions. They're scaled this way. They're categorized this way. They get refreshed once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've opted in to do X or Y with your data. And then on the back of that, there's a data licensing component, because while we all license data from third parties for something, and I made this example in a previous conversation, which was around sampling, music sampling, right? There's a
Right.
fair use statute. I happen to be a lawyer also. And there's a fair use statute where you can use just so much of music before you have to license it. And the same thing should apply realistically to consumer data. Is I'm granting you a fair use license to use data up to a point, and then beyond, I'm going to opt in exchange for services or opportunity.
Right.
And I think I'm just going to put it out there. Someone should invent the fair use statute for consumer data, and a standard set of permissioning that runs across all industries. You can keep that one. It's free. It's yours. So we're running up against time. I want to do one thing. Well, first I'll thank my friends at UST who sponsored this session. So if you don't know, UST offers health tech solutions that enhance trust, connectivity, personalization, and efficiency. Learn more, please, at ust.health. It's a great URL. I'll ask you one question. You're only gonna answer. I'm not gonna answer. What's the one thing that, if you could wish something into existence, I'm gonna change the question on you right at the last minute.
All right.
Would make your job easier every day?
Can I slip in 3 real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm up
it's a minute. We'll
against
call it
like
3
59
minutes.
seconds,
It's fine.
right?
It's all right. No one's gonna kick us off. Go ahead.
Data, right?
Okay.
Is that
the 3 or is that
managed?
1?
No, that's 1.
Okay.
My 1 is 3.
Okay.
Collect the right information. Organizations should learn how to manage data, curate it, and harvest data. The second thing I would say is personalization. Just watch out, right? Security matters, compliance matters. So as much as consumers, you wish they were solutions tailored for you.
So the
I would
perfect
just-
balance of personalization.
Perfect balance of
All right.
watch what you ask is
Okay.
my
Watch what
third.
you ask for.
And 3,
Gotcha.
again, I would drive back home the optimism that I started with. All of us should be thinking about how many which ways have we come further along, while you're keeping an eye on how much more there is to achieve. Don't lose sight of the fact that you can influence how healthcare is delivered in future. You
And
could be a consumer,
I'm-
payer, provider, doesn't matter.
I'm going to echo you and say we have come a long way. We're going to be proud of that, to end this session on an up note.
All right.
So thank you, Sushma. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
the time.